We also learned about loops, right? So loops are where computers get their power, their strength, right? So loops allow us to execute a block of code over and over and over and over and over again, a certain amount of times, or until some condition is met, right? And we looked at one type of loop very briefly last week called a for loop. And I also mentioned another one called a while loop. So we're going to look at that a little bit more today. Then finally, the last thing, the big thing, so if loops are a computer's strength, if else statements or conditional statements are its intelligence. This is where a program gets its intelligence, or we program intelligence into the program, right? So we did a very, very simple, we created our first dynamic web page last week, right? Remember we created a JavaScript script that would display a different message depending on the time of day, right? So that is a dynamic web page. It's different depending on certain things, certain states. Okay, so those were the three concepts. Okay, so let's just quickly look back at the examples that we were working on. Let's see if this is the script we were using. Or let me use Dreamweaver. Open with Dreamweaver. Okay, so this was our JavaScript file, and let's also open up our index file. I'm going to drag this over here, and just our style sheet, we might as well bring that up as well. Okay, so this was our index file. What we did was we referenced our JavaScript file at the top in our header, just like we do with our style sheet. So we created a reference, and what this essentially says is go to this file and start running this code. Right? Run this code. So the first thing that we did, what are we doing here? What did we do here on this first line? Which one of the three pillars are we implementing in this case? A variable. Exactly. We are declaring and assigning a value to a variable. So what's the name of this variable? My first variable. And what's the value of this variable? 10. Exactly. Right. Can we tell what's the type of this? Given that we've assigned a value, what's the type of data that's stored in this variable? Is it a Boolean type? No, it's not a Boolean, because Boolean is either true or false. 10 is not. It's more than that, right? Is it a string? Why do you think it's a string? Well, remember I said with a string you always need quotes. No quotes, no string. So someone said number. Yes, but you can be more correct than that. What type of number type is it? It's an integer, right? So usually at least we'll have integers and then numbers with decimal points. So usually we call them floating points or doubles. So there's numbers without decimals and numbers with decimals. Okay? So what are we doing here? Same thing, right? We're declaring a variable called x, assigning it a value of 1. Then we're declaring a variable called y, assigning it a value of 5. And then here, instead of mod, this is a little obtuse for an example, we'll do this. So this, now the value of x, which is 1, and y, which is 5, we sum that together, that's 6, and so the value of z will be 6. So here, this is now we're declaring a string. So see how I've put in Carmen as a string. But if I did this, is that a number or is that a string? It's a string because it is, even though it's a number, but we have, we've put quotes around it, so it's a string. It's different, right? So what would happen if you tried to add two strings versus if you tried to add two numbers? Well, if it's a number, it'll do the arithmetic. If it's a string, if one of them is a string, it'll just concatenate them and glue them together, right? So here I said, Carmen, string 1, string 2 equals Carmen and Branje, and then string 3, I'm using plus, which is the same that I'm using here, but because the type is string, it's just going to put them together because Carmen plus Branje doesn't make any mathematical sense, right? So, okay. So what did we do here? This was a little complex. I sort of glossed over what we're doing here. This part we know. We are declaring a variable and we're assigning a value, but it's a complex value. It's not just a number or a string. It's something called an object. And an object is like a variable, but an object has values and functions. So it has not only what the object is, but the object can do things, right? So for example, our object, so we've created a new object called the date, right? So before this line, the date is just an empty variable like any of these variables, right? But now what we're doing is we're assigning an object to this variable, okay? Then here we're saying go inside the object. Remember I said let's say I'm the object, the overarching object. So then Carmen.arm gives access to my arm, let's say, or left arm, let's say. Right? Then I could say Carmen.leftarm.hand. That gives me access to my hand, part of my arm. Similar thing, objects are similarly constructed. So we have the date, and so think of it as the conceptual date. Like when you say, what's the date today? Right? That means there's a ton of stuff that comes with that. There's the year, the time, the hour, or the time zone. Think of all the information that comes with the date. That's all included in there. So for example, we can get just the hours, right? We just want that little bit. So we use a function call called getHours, right? If we use Dreamweaver, we can even see it's smart enough to know that this is an object, and it gives us a list of all the things we can do. Okay? So mostly it's just we can call functions. So for example, let's get the hours again, and we'll close it off. So now the hours is going to be an integer value from 0 to 24, or 0 to 23, I guess, or 1 to 24. I'm not too sure what the boundaries are. So what we've done now is we've created some conditional statements. So we're saying if the hours is less than 12. So remember, inside the if statements, we always have statements that will resolve to either being true or false. Okay? So if hours is equal to 1, and 1 is less than 12, that statement would be true, and therefore the code in these brackets will be executed. Okay? Then if we go here, now we've joined two statements with an and. Okay, so now both of these statements need to be true in order for this code to run. So what we're basically saying is we want to check to see if the hours is between 12 and 16. So if something is between something, you need to have two conditions, right? So if something's between 12 and 16, it has to be greater than 12 and also less than 16. Otherwise, it's not between, as per the definition of between, right? Then we also learned about else. So else is just sort of the catch-all. So if this statement is false, then just do this. Okay? And remember, there's also one more called else if. So this now becomes a group. So we have the first if, and then every other else if after that is part of a group, and then finally the last else. So what happens if you have a group like that? As soon as it finds a true, it stops checking the rest of them. Okay? Okay. So let's bring this back a little bit down to earth, down to some JavaScript. Okay? So what I want to do here is I want to what we're going to do is something that's very commonly done with JavaScript, and that is we're going to validate our form. Okay, we're going to make sure that the form, the data entered in our form, is correct. Okay. So what? Oh, and we also learned about loops, but we're not going to learn about that in today's. It's not. We don't need it for the assignment, so I'm not really going to talk about it. We might come back to loops later, but most importantly, are variables and conditional statements for the assignment. Okay. So let's look back to our index page. Okay, and actually let's look at our page in a browser. So we created our HTML page, and we created so that's my script there, right? Okay, and we created a form here. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that some of the values here are in some sort of state, right? So maybe we want to make sure that they filled out the first name. We need that for some reason. Okay? Well, we can do that in JavaScript. Okay? So let's do that. So remember when maybe it was a while ago. Do I have no, I think I actually overwrote that example. Oh yes, remember, think back to when we first learned about forms and we first introduced JavaScript. Remember we grabbed the value from the form and we put it in an alert box. Remember when we did that? Let's do that again. We'll catch up to that example and we'll do that again. So let's use what I'm going to do for now. Actually, let's create I'm going to create a new example. So I'm going to copy this, paste it, and we're going to rename this form validation. Okay. And I'm going to close these because these are my old files. And I'm going to reopen my index file, my script, and my style sheet. Okay. So here are my three files. Okay. So I'm going to delete my let's get rid of this. Everything in the script we'll delete. We're going to start fresh, and we'll go back to our index here. Okay, so one thing, let's see, we didn't really talk, I don't think we talked about this. So one other thing before we get to this, I just want to jump back to our JavaScript. So I think we might have talked about this when we first looked at it, but I want to reiterate it. So one thing, I'm not sure if we can really fit this into the three pillars. I guess this isn't really it's not any of the three, but nevertheless. So there's something in programming called a function, and it's the same in math. If you think back to I suppose calculus and do they do functions in algebra? No, I guess it's just called functions. There is a course called functions, is there not? In high school? Yeah. Okay. So they work very similarly, right? Oh yeah, I did a whole thing on functions. Remember I showed you my little black box, my little paint drawing, right? So there are two things that come in and one thing that go out. Or it doesn't have to be two in one, but things go in, there's some magic that happens, and then output is produced. Okay, so think of a function sort of like that. So remember back here, we used a function. This right here, this is a function, right? That gets the hours for us. Do we really care how it does that? No, not really. We just want to use the function. Okay, so what we're actually going to do, we're going to create our own function, because what we need to do, we need to create a block of code that will run whenever somebody submits our form. Okay? So what we need to do is create a function, because then we can reference that function in our form, in our HTML form. Okay? So what we're going to say, so we use just like we use the keyword var to define a variable. We use the keyword function to define a function. Okay. I suppose if you really wanted to stretch it, we could fit functions inside variables, maybe. Never mind. I'm just musing. Okay, so function. So what would be a good name? So remember I said one of the things about variables is you should give them meaningful names. Names that indicate what it is you're doing with the thing. So what would be a good name for a function that's going to validate our form? What would be a good name? Validate form. Perfect. Validate form. Okay, so that's the name of our function. Okay. So now we need to include two brackets. So inside the brackets we would put our attributes, right? Or the stuff that goes into the function. Right? So let's say if we had a function making bread, that would be stuff like eggs, milk, flour, all that stuff goes into the function. Okay? So now we're going to create two braces. Okay? And so in here, this is like actually baking the bread. This is where we're going to take the ingredients, do stuff, and then spit out the result. Okay? So we've created, so remember I always said I like to test things to make sure they're working before I get too far. Because I don't want to put errors on top of errors on top of errors. So I'm going to put an alert box here, and I'll just say something like, I'm working. Like this. Okay? So we have our function, and we have our alert boxes that you should never use in a real web page and only use for testing. Okay? So we're going back here. So now this is our form. Remember our form? Remember, so we had our, so the outermost tag was just our form tag, and it had a number of attributes inside, and then we had things. So basically we used the input tag with different types. So we used text and password and radio buttons and checkboxes and select. Okay? So notice there are a couple of important attributes here. Okay? So one, the most important one is this one here, on submit. Okay? So what we've done here is we're saying on submit, I want you to call my function validate form. Okay? So for the meantime, you can just ignore this keyword return. I'll come back and explain that in a minute. But for now, just make sure that your form has this, on submit, return validate form, in quotes. Okay? I don't believe this is necessary because we've included it up here. I'm pretty sure. Let's get rid of it and see if it works. So now, what should happen when I submit my form? Right? So first of all, what function will be called when I submit my form? Yeah, validate form. Right? And what's inside validate form? An alert box. So what's going to happen when I submit the form? We should get an alert box, not this one. I have to open it up because I get this one here. Here we go. I'm working. So I was right. We didn't need this part here. We didn't need that action part because we have a reference to the JavaScript file here. If we didn't have this, we would need that part down there. Okay. The other part, this is important as well, the method. We can ignore that for now. There are two methods, get and post. And post puts the data on, doesn't put the data on the URL. Get does. And we'll look at an example of why we would want to do that or not do that. Use either get or post. Okay? But for now, we just have to worry about the fact that validate form is triggering our function. So we're good up until that point. Okay, so now what we want to do, let's go back to our script. So we'll get rid of our alert because we know that we're working. And so we're going to create a variable now. So the first rule of our, let's say of our form, is we want the first name to have something in it. There must be something input into the first name. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back here and we're going to say var. So we're going to create a variable to store the first name. What should we call the variable? First name. And we're going to use camel case. So all lowercase for the first word, and then uppercase for the first letter of each next word. Okay? So first name equals. So now what we're going to do, we're going to use some objects to gain access to our form values. Okay? So objects sort of form a hierarchy. Like I was saying, I was using my body as an example, right? So the outermost object that contains everything is the document, right? Which makes sense. That's your web page. That's good. Obviously, that contains all the stuff for your web page, right? The document. So what we can do, and there's a couple of ways to do this. This is just one way. In fact, there's actually a technology called jQuery that we will probably get to next week that makes a lot of this stuff much, much easier. But I just wanted to show you it at the low level so you understand what's going on. Okay, so now, from our document, what subsection of the document we want to access are the forms. So Dreamweaver is even giving me hints. So these are all the things inside document that I can access. So the green things are variables or other objects, and the red things are functions or methods. Okay, so we're going to pick one of the green variables called forms. Okay, so that contains all of our forms. Okay, so now we're going to go inside using a slightly different syntax, and so now we're going to use a square bracket and quote, and inside we're going to put the name of our form, which was my form, I believe. Let's look back at our index file. So here, see our name? Name was an attribute of our form tag, and we've called it my form. Okay, so that's the name that we reference over here. Okay, so this much, that gets us our form. But we don't want the whole form, we just want part of the form. So what we want is what did we call the first name? So if we go here, the name is called first name. So that's what we'll use to get that value. So we'll go back here, and we'll say quote, and we'll finish off the bracket. And inside the quotes, we'll put first name. Okay? And then the thing about that is, so the form field is more than just its value, right? There's a lot about the form field. There's its position, its color, its height, its length, all that. So we want even to drill down even more, and we only want one aspect of that field, which is its value. Okay, so we're going to access the value. Okay, so what have we done here? We've sort of sucked in the value of our form field into our script now, and now we can do stuff with that value. We can make decisions. We can print things. We can do all sorts of things. So before we go too far, let's alert our first name just to make sure that it's working in the way that we think it's working. So we'll go back here. We'll refresh. And we'll put in something in first name, and we'll click submit, and there we go. So that part of our script is working, and we can feel pretty comfortable moving forward. Okay? You want to go back to the code? Yep. Sorry? No, because what would appear if I put this? It'd say just first name all the time. But I want it to, think of what the word variable means. It means it varies, it changes. So you want to put in whatever variation the variable is at that point in time. If you put strings, it'll just put exactly what you put in the string. Oh, okay. What's it doing? Is the alert coming up at all? Oh, okay. So that means, what does that mean? I don't know. I have to look at just something went wrong. So the alert came up before? Oh, it never came up. Okay. So and so, oh, but you click submit. Anyone else have any? Some people got it, right? It worked for some people.
Is your first name lowercase?
Yes. So no, because the alert. Okay, comment out the first line in your JavaScript. Comment out this line. Because what happens with JavaScript sometimes is, as soon as it'll run until it hits an error, and then after it hits an error, it'll just stop. So if you comment out this line and put this in quotes, and if the alert is coming up, that means something's wrong with this line. If it's not coming up, that means there's something wrong either in your link or in your form, in the HTML form. So try doing that and let me know what happened. So the alert came up. Okay, so that means there's a problem in that line. So let's see what it is. No, not that. It should say, yeah, click continue. Oh, so hit submit. And so you did that, you got rid of the first line. Oh, you have square brackets there. On form. Okay, go back to your form. Your HTML. First name, return form. Oh, your form name is called subscribe.
Oh.
Still doing it? So nothing? Okay, so something is wrong. Oh, but comment out this line. And then put quotes around first name. Oh, I think you're missing a semicolon. But try that. And then, so if the alert comes up, then it was definitely, okay, it's working? Okay. And I think that should work. Excellent. Okay, so now just uncomment that line and take away the quotes. Okay, so we have successfully grabbed the value of our first name. Okay, and so we'll comment out the alert box for now. Put that away. So sometimes I like to comment out code rather than delete it, especially if I'm sort of working with stuff, because then I don't have to retype it. I can just uncomment it and stuff like that. So it sometimes helps. Okay, so now what we're going to do, so we want to check to make sure that there's something in this variable, right? So which of the three pillars we learned, variables, well, we have to use a variable, and then there's ifs and loops. So which of those two are we going to need to use to do this? If, right? We need to make a decision, right? So in English, just tell me the program. How is this going to work? In English, just tell it to me.
If there are letters in the form, it's a name.
Yeah, or so say if first name is a value, or what we could say is, so I'll make it a little more bring it down a little bit more so it's a little more program-like. So I would say if the length of the value of first name is less than or no, I'd say less than 1, then do not submit the form. Else, submit the form. That's it. So let's write that in code. Let's do that. So let's say if, so we use the word if. So if first name, okay, and so there's a couple of things we can do. So when we compare values, we use 2 equal signs. Remember that, right? What do we use 1 equal sign for? When we assign a value. See right here? Right? So here, this is the value, and we're assigning it to the left side. Here, we're going to compare 2 things, so we're going to use 2 equal signs. So one thing is we can check to see if first name equals the empty string. Okay, that might work. But there's also, so if it's empty, and then we're going to use the OR keyword. So if it's empty, or if first name is equal to null. So null is different than empty. Right?
Where did you get the
Shift. And so mine is right above my enter key. It's the /. Yep. Bar, double bar for the OR. Yep. So now we have our 2 conditions. So if one of these is true, it means there's something wrong with the form. Right? If it's either the empty string or if it's null, then we don't want to submit this form. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our curly braces. And for now, we're going to use an alert. We're going to say, now again, don't ever do this in a real web page. This is because I need to show you some other stuff before we can do this the proper way. So I'm showing you with alert boxes just because I need to. So then we'll say a message like you need to put something in for the first name, or maybe enter a first name, something like that. You can put in whatever you'd like. Okay? So one more thing we're going to do is we're going to use another keyword called return, and we're going to return false. So think of the keyword return is like when you deliver the final product of your function. So let's say in your bread making function, that would be the baker would return the bread to the store owner. Return it, right? Send it out. Kick it out of the function. So what we're doing is we're returning out of our function, we're returning false. And so our form, when we click submit, it's waiting for true or false. Right? So it's saying return the result of validate form. So the result of validate form will be what? One of 2. One of what? What are the 2 possible values that validate form will be? True or false. It's either good or it's not. Right? So if we return false, the form will say, oh, it won't submit. The screen won't refresh. If we return true, it will, quote, submit. So that means, because we're not learning any server-side technology, usually what that means is the form data would be sent along to a server-side script, which would then maybe inject it into a database or something. Otherwise, if it's invalid, we don't want to waste the server's time dealing with incorrect data. We want to make sure it's correct on the client side. Make the client use their resources to check the data. And then, once it's valid, then send it to the server. So that's what we want to do. So let's save our script and refresh our form. And let's try and submit. Oh, it says enter first name. I can't submit without it. Okay? So now, if I put something in, it submits. Okay? So if we went to, okay, I'm going to jump you guys ahead a little bit. So let's do this. Action. This is the only, oh no, I can't because I'm not running on a server. Okay, never mind, we can't do that. I was going to show you something neat, but we're not going to. So for now, we'll just, so if we don't get the message, you can assume that the form has been submitted. Okay? So, now what do we want to do? So, we want to make sure that, okay, let's add in another form field. Okay? So under last name, I'm going to copy this whole thing. I'm going to paste it under here. I'm going to change this to email. Okay. And I'm going to change this, the name of it, to email. Actually, you know what? Before we do the email, we're going to do the password. It's a little simpler. Okay? So, what's some typical restrictions on passwords? You've probably tried to sign up for something lately online, and maybe you tried to use a password. And what's one of the restrictions that most sites hold you to for your password? Sorry? Yeah, usually 8. It has to be 8. Okay? So, so we need to check the password field now. So first of all, what's the first thing we need to do before we consider the conditional statement? What do we have to do? It's going to follow a very similar pattern to what we have here. Sorry? Oh, no, we want to keep this. We're going to build on this. So the first thing that we did here is we got the value from the form and injected it into our script so that we could work with it. We want to do the same thing now, but with the password field. So we can copy this, paste it, and let's change the value of first name. Let's change it to password. Okay? And same thing here. What do we have to change on this side? What do we have to change? Yeah, we'll change this first name, and password. Okay? So now we can assume that the value will get stuck here. Okay. So, let's say the first thing, we'll do the exact same check that we did for the first name, because they need a password, right? Or no, actually we could do the check all in one, because if the length is greater than 8, then it obviously exists, right? You can't have a non-existing string that has more than 8 characters. So we'll do it all in one line. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a function, a built-in JavaScript function that will return the length of our variable, the length of our string. Okay? So what we want to do is we're going to use our if statement again. We're going to create our brackets and our curly braces. Okay? And inside here, we're going to say if password dot length okay, so that's going to give me the number of characters that I need. Okay, so what's going to be on the other side? What operator am I going to use first of all? Well, I could, but because I don't want it just for 8. Like a 20 character password's fine. And I don't want to have, a million equal signs. Greater than. Greater than what? 8? Are you sure?
7.
Because if it's greater than 8, an 8 character password be allowed? No. So we could say greater than 7 or greater than equal to 8. Then an 8 character password will be true. So then here we'll copy the alert again. And what would be a good message here? What's a message? Our message should be, should tell the user what's going on in the system. What would be a good, useful message for this user?
Please indicate characters.
Yeah. Sorry, what did you say?
Please devise a password that's 8 or more.
Yeah, exactly. So, or you could just say password too short, something like that. We can get as descriptive as we want. So let's try it. Okay, so here's a question for you. Why did I put if here and not if else if? Why did I put if and not if else if? What's the difference between a bunch of ifs versus an if, then else if, else if, else if, else if, else if? What's the difference?
If either of those don't work, you don't want it submitted rather than if.
Sort of. You're on the right track. If it's else if, as soon as it finds a true, it doesn't check the remainder of the else ifs. But if it's if, it checks every one, that's what we want, right? Because all the fields need to be valid, right? So really, it's almost as if here between these two ifs is an and, in a way. And we could combine these ifs. I could nest them in here, but you don't want to have too many things nested. It gets a little crazy, right? Okay. So password. Okay. So the other thing I want to do is I want to we want to check I want to make sure the password, the email address. I want to make sure at least, so without sending someone email, I can't really know if it's a valid email address. But how would I know for sure? Like, what are some necessary conditions of an email address? Yes. It needs to have an @ symbol in it. Okay, that's one. What else does it need to have? Yes. That would be a little difficult to code for, though, because you don't want to keep anybody out that you don't account for. And there's so many new domains coming out now, high-level domains. Like there's now .pizza, all this stuff, right? So you don't want to exclude those people. And we want to just restrict it to the conditions we know are absolutely, you need this. If you don't have this, it's not an email address. It doesn't matter where, the dot. Yeah. So you need an @ and you need a dot. And what's one more thing that we could maybe check? So it's not the presence of a character. What's another condition we could check? There is always a dot after the @. Right? Now there could be a dot before the @, but if there isn't one after the @, like if it's .@ and that's it, then your email is invalid. There's something wrong. Okay? So I thought we won't do the third one. We'll just do the first two. Okay? So what's the first thing again that we have to do? So remember, we added in our email field here, and we named it email. Excuse me. So what's the first thing we have to do? Maybe up here. Yeah, sorry? Yeah, so what are we doing when we do that? Right, a little more so than that, more descriptive. What else are we doing? Yeah, we're getting the value from our form and bringing it into our script. right? So we can, again, we'll just copy this line, right? Because I know all my quotes and everything are in the right place, so I won't make an error that way. And then I'll change my variable to email, and I'll copy and paste that, and I have to paste that in there as well. Okay? Okay, so let's do another check. So again, this is like another AND, right? So, think of these. So the first name must exist, and the password must be greater than 8, and something else, and. Okay. So now we're going to say now we're going to use some more functions, some JavaScript functions. Okay. So we're going to define another variable. So we'll use the keyword var, and we're going to call this the @position. Okay? So this is going to represent the position that the @ symbol is at. Okay? So what's this going to equal? So the @position is going to equal the email. So our email variable that we defined up here. Okay? Dot. So we want to access something inside that string. Okay, so a string variable is not only a value, but also functions, right? Remember when we looked up here, when I went to document, remember the green? What's the green? Other way around. Variables, and the red are functions. So a string is kind of the same thing. You have here's a variable inside a string, right, length, and now we're going to use a function that's contained inside string. So we're going to use the function called index of. So it's going to tell us the position of a certain character. So we're going to use brackets, quote, quote, and inside we're going to put the @ symbol. Okay? And then we're going to copy this, and we're going to change @ to dot, and here we're going to put a dot. Okay. And then just so we can see what's going on, I'm going to alert the @ position, and I'm going to concatenate it with a space, and then concatenate it with the dot position. Like so.
What is the empty quotes in the dot position?
So what this will do is, it'll become clear when we alert it. But let's say if I just did this, let's say the @ position is 5 and the dot position is 6. So it's going to print out 56, like with no space, which is harder for me to read. So I want something in between the numbers. So I'm going to stick in the middle an empty space, right? So I'm putting literally quote space, right? Space is a character, right? It counts. It's like it's an ASCII character. You need a value to represent it. So I could do this, something like that. That would separate it as well. That might be a little more clear. Okay, let's check it out. Let's try it. So let's refresh. So now we have our email form here. So let's just type the letter A and submit. So it's going to say enter first name. And wait a second, why didn't it? Oh, because it returned false right away. Okay. So do I want to? Yeah, let's get rid of this for now. So because actually what happens is when you return something, it exits the script immediately, right from that spot, right? Because remember, it's like when the bread maker passes the bread off. He's done. That's it. You're done. So because this was true, I alerted it. Then I returned false. The rest of the script is just ignored. Okay. So I'm just going to comment this out for now. So now we're going to check each one. Okay. So we'll go back and let's refresh. And I'll still have my A, and let's submit. So enter a first name. Why didn't the password? Okay, we'll go back. So now it says -1 and -1. That means it doesn't exist. If it returns -1, that means we didn't find it. Okay? Okay. But why didn't the password one
That's
come
what's
up?
not coming from
Is greater than... Oh, password's not coming up for you either. Why? Okay, hang on. Let me do this. Just make sure this is working. Oh, do you know? Because probably it's... Oh, yeah, I have to do... I know why. Wait, 0. Why did it... What? Oh,
Password length.
yeah. No, I have it the wrong way. Oops. See what I mean? I still have to have the mouth chomp the greater value, right? In order for me to remember. So now that should work, because before I was saying if password length is greater than 8, say it's too short. But that doesn't make any sense.
Maybe that's the equal this time.
Yes, that's also true. Yes, I totally messed up that. Okay, so let's go back, and now we should, okay, enter first name, password too short, -1, -1. Okay, now let's do this. Let's put in an @ and a dot. Now let's try it again. Submit, so enter first name, password too short, 0 and 1. So the first position is 0, and then every other position is indexed from there. So the second position is actually 1. The third is 2. Okay? Okay, so what can we do with that now? So now we know it returns the number, the position of those symbols. So we could do a couple of things. We could say so the @ symbol cannot be the first symbol, right? You can't have an email address at gmail.com. So how would we construct a Boolean rule? So knowing that, so we know the position of the email, the position of the @ or the dot is stored in these variables. So how would we, so first of all, if the @ symbol was the first character, what would be the value of @ position? 0, right? So we could say, so it can't be 0, right? So what's one way of saying anything but 0? Yeah, greater than 0 could work. Because it also can't, that actually works for the other case where it doesn't exist. Because if it doesn't exist, it's -1. So we'll say if @ position is less than 1, right? So if it's in the first position or if it doesn't exist, then we have a problem. Okay? So now we're going to create an OR. Double bar. So the dot, so what restrictions do we have about the dot? Can the dot be the first position? No. Can the dot be the second position? No. Why not?
This is something
Well, the at least needs to be in it. Can the dot be in the third position? No, because you need something in front of the at. So think the shortest email would be a@b.com. Right? So it needs to be, a@b dot. So it has to be fourth position, which is what the value, which is 3, the value of 3. So it has to be what? So we could say dot position is greater. No. So this is if it's a problem. These are the conditions. So it's less than 4. That's a problem. Now, what about, could we do this? Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious @.com. Can we do that? No. Ignore the first part. That was just by showing you have a really long first name. That works. Then you have @.com. You need something between the at and the dot. So how could we do that? So let's say it goes like this. Let's say, so I'm going to comment this out. Let's say the problematic, so the first part of, or let's do this. So it's at, or let's do 1. a@.com. Okay? So this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. So the difference between these two in this case is what? How much? 1. Right? So now if the difference is, let's say we put it here, is that valid? Yeah. So now what's the difference between here and here? 2. So the difference has to be greater than 1. Right? So we'll have to put that in the negative, but what we would say is there's a couple of ways. So we could say, or then in brackets I would say dot position minus at position is less than 2. Right? And then finally another closing bracket. Okay?
Is that the greater than?
No. So the difference between, like this, so I subtract, so it means the difference between the spots is less than 2. So that means there's a problem. Right? They're too close together. Okay? So let's see if this works. Let's see if our logic actually works. So I'm just going to, for now, I'm going to comment out my other alerts so that I don't, constantly have a million alerts coming up. So now I'm going to say here, your password is invalid. Okay, so let's try it. So let's try 1. No, wait, not password. What am I doing? Come on, you guys are supposed to be correcting me here. Your email. So we'll come back here. Hi.
I thought a lot of students looking for someone in Alice's class.
Nope.
Just me.
Yep. No problem. Okay, so alert. Your email is invalid. So let's go back here. Let's try it. So let's put in, hey, where'd you go? 1. Submit. Your password is invalid. Oh, I didn't save. Or maybe I didn't refresh. Let's refresh. Email, 1. Your email is invalid. So 1, okay, let's do the shortest valid one we know. a@b.c. Oh, no, what happened? a@b.c. So I think Because this is 1, 2, 3. 3 subtract 1 is 2. That's not less than that. Oh, dot position. Oh, so this one is too restrictive. We were incorrect on this one. So the dot position is 0, 1, 2, 3. So it can be 3. So if it's less than 3, then we have a problem. Right? Because if it's 0, 1, or 2, then we have a problem. Right? So let's save that and retry it with our shortest possible valid email. So did we refresh? Okay. Submit. Yes! It went through. So let's try this now. a@.com. Yes. Invalid. How about a.atcom? Submit. Yes. All right. So it works pretty well, right? So our shortest email works, and as long as there's probably some conditions, like I think one other condition is I guess I don't know. There's a few others we missed, but you see the point, right? Okay. So let's see. I think you're okay now. Let's just check the assignment. You should be okay now to complete the assignment, I think. But I'm just going to double check to make sure I've shown you everything. Assignments. Okay, so let's just go over this quickly. So use your assignment from last week as a starting point. Add a new page and a corresponding link in your nav bar. Create a form that's appropriate for signing up a new user to your site. Okay, so we've learned about forms. Do that. Create a JavaScript file, link it to your HTML file. Create a form validation script that does the following. So make sure a value is entered for the first name, for the last name. Make sure the password is at least 8 characters. Make sure the email address has both an @ and a dot in it. And if any of these conditions are not met, the form should not submit. Okay? Okay. So, pretty objective, right? You should be able to get perfect on this. So let's do, well, I showed you how to do it, right? You guys can watch the video, and then that's it. Just follow what I do. What's that?
You should have to go above and beyond, because it just says that and the dot. Doesn't say
Yeah, that's true. I showed you even more. Exactly. So, yeah, you guys were swinging with 2 bats, and now you can crank it out of the park. Okay.
So do you, just to do the last thing so it won't submit, do you have to do the return false?
Yes. Yes. So, just looking at that again. So, remember I took out these false here, right? So,
Do you have to do just one, or do you have to
no, it has to be in every if, because if this one's okay, like they've entered in the first name, but it's only a 7-character password, then we need to return false here, right? And then you would also want your alert, because you want to. There's nothing more frustrating than a form that's not submitting, and you don't know why. Tell the user. Okay. Okay. So, any questions about the assignment? No? Pretty straightforward.
I have a question, but
Okay.
I have to show you.
Sure. We'll talk offline. Okay. So, before we switch gears, I think we'll take a 5-minute break. I need to get a drink of water. Yes. Yep. Yes, in every if statement. Yep. Yep. Okay, so remember, next week I will not be here in person. So I'm going to be using Google Hangouts, and actually because I was a little bit worried. Their Hangouts has a limit of 10 video entrants, but they have this other thing called Google Broadcast, which has a 15 limit, which is perfect for the class, and it automatically records to YouTube. So, yeah, that's crazy. And I'm thinking of even just doing that, because right now I'm recording using Camtasia, and then it takes like 4 hours to upload to YouTube after it processes. Maybe in 2 lectures I'll try doing that from here. Then you could even stream it, then watch it after, or come in class. The choices are endless. So you can come here in the lab and listen to the stream if you want, or any place in the world with a fast internet connection should be suitable. I will post, I don't think I will know the link until I set it up right before we go. So just go to the Blackboard announcements page and just wait for an announcement. So I should be at I'm going to be streaming from the airport. They have this business lounge that has high speed, like a wired connection. So I should be there by about 6. So I should have the posting up before 9:30. So check for the link there. And then we tested it out last week. It's just a question of clicking on the link and we should be good to go. I would recommend headphones. And maybe if you have a headset, you should own a USB headset just anyways, right? I don't know if you guys Skype or do any VoIP kind of stuff, but I mean it's so cheap. And that's what I'm going to be using is a USB headset because you can't get a better sound. And the other thing is when you're video conferencing, it's better for headphones because then you can crank up the volume without feedback. Because when the speaker and mic are in the same environment, Skype has some software to try and cut it out, but it's better with a headset. So I'm not sure if Google Broadcast allows you to, if you have a question, you may have to email it to me. And I'll keep my email up, and then just fire me an email, and I'll see it. Oh, someone has a question, and I'll answer it. But maybe that would be really cool if you could. I'm not sure if you can, but if you can just jump in, but you would probably need a headset for that. But you don't need it. Okay. So, what we want to do before the break. So we're going to do. So your next assignment after this current one is going to be a group assignment. Okay. So first thing is get into a group of 3. How many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 3 groups of 3, 1 group of 2. And make sure one of you in your group, or probably all of you, I'm going to show you Azure a little bit, just take you through it. Make sure at least one of you has access. Because what we're going to do, I'm going to take you through a little bit of design, and we're going to spend probably the last half an hour or so getting started on your assignment. And we're going to be building an interface for an application. Okay? So I'm just going to get a drink of water. So form a group of 3. Make sure you have Azure, and that's pretty much it. Okay? Okay, I'll be back in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Scroll down? Sure.